2,000 years ago, in a village called Nazareth, there was once a boy. His young life is a total mystery, but he became the most famous man of his age. Now we go beyond the Gospels in search of the lost years of Jesus to paint a shocking new portrait of a boy who had brothers and sisters, of a man who was not a carpenter. And we uncover new archaeological evidence of a ritual that lets us see into the mind of Jesus and the birth of Christianity. He was born in a manger. He died on a cross. He created a new religion. But most of his life remains shrouded in mystery. A grown man called Jesus first walked into history around the year 28 AD, when he approached the banks of the River Jordan. Another man stood in the water. He was dressed in a camel hair tunic. His name was John. He's remembered as a radical preacher. But his name would have been long forgotten were it not for what was about to take place: the baptism of Jesus of Nazareth.
And just as he was coming up out of the water, he saw the heavens torn apart and the Spirit descending like a dove on him.
It is the moment when Christians believe Jesus became Christ, the Anointed One.
It was the beginning of Jesus' relationship to God as Son of God.
But why did Jesus come to John the Baptist? According to the Gospel of Luke, Jesus was already around 30 years old when he walked out of the Jordan. What drove him to change the course of his life so dramatically? The Bible gives us no clue.
The earliest evidence that we have in the New Testament shows no concern for Jesus' birth, nor any concern whatsoever for his upbringing. He simply appears and is baptized.
What happened in the missing years between birth and baptism? Is there a way to fill in the lost youth of Jesus and discover how a boy from a humble village grew up to become a religious leader and to change history? If the Bible doesn't tell us, then perhaps archaeology will. We're going to recreate the village of Nazareth the way it looked 2,000 years ago. We'll hunt for clues about who John the Baptist really was. And we'll show what it was like to grow up Jewish in the 1st century, a time of turmoil and violence. Close scrutiny of the Bible reveals just one mention of boy Jesus, and it's only in a single gospel. At age 12, Jesus gets separated from his parents in Jerusalem. They discover him 3 days later in the temple.
They found him sitting among the teachers. All who heard him were amazed at his understanding.
But this scene provides no details of what Jesus actually said, and nothing about his background as a boy from a village in Galilee. For that, we must go back to the Holy Land, to the place where Jesus grew up. This is modern-day Nazareth in northern Israel. It is the country's largest Arab city with nearly 60,000 citizens, 2/3 Muslim, 1/3 Christian. Our search for Jesus takes us here to the Church of the Annunciation. For Christians, it's the spiritual heart of the town. Mary and Joseph probably raised Jesus within a stone's throw of this spot. A century ago, monks excavated the church's crypt, and they found the remains of an ancient village. Here, cut into the bedrock, there are water cisterns and grain silos. Archaeologists believe these are the remains of the tiny village that was Jesus' Nazareth.
It was probably a small Galilean village. It was certainly a Jewish village, agriculturally based, and I would be surprised if there were more than a few hundred residents in that village.
The village of Jesus' youth was truly insignificant.
The name Nazareth doesn't appear on the historical record until the Gospels. It's absolutely absent. It was a nowheresville, small town.
Given how small Nazareth was, the evidence here is not enough to recreate Jesus' home. But just a few miles away lies what's left of a Galilean town called Yodafat. This place, abandoned in the 1st century and never built on again, is an archaeologist's treasure trove. From these remains, we will reconstruct the house and the village where Jesus grew up.
Houses in this area were built on the natural rock and then built up with fieldstones and mud in between, covered outside and inside with plaster, in simple houses with mud plaster.
This is the village of Nazareth, as Jesus would have seen it. The book of ancient Jewish writings, the Talmud, tells us how families divided labor. The men worked as shepherds or farmers, growing just enough wheat, olives, and vegetables to survive. The women were busy at home.
The primary responsibility of the wife and mother in a village setting is to provide everything that is necessary for the family. She has to bake bread, she makes the garments, she washes the clothes, she does all of these household maintenance tasks.
Jesus' mother, Mary, would have served her family a simple breakfast soon after dawn each day. Probably staples like bread and olives. But who was her family? Most of us think of it as just Jesus and Joseph. That is probably wrong. The Gospel of Mark clearly says that Jesus did have brothers and sisters.
Is not this the brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us?
The Catholic Church argues that brother and sister don't necessarily imply blood relation, but the New Testament mentions Jesus' siblings many times.
Mary, the mother of James, James, the Lord's brother, his mother and his brothers were standing outside. Then his mother and his brothers came with his mother, his brothers, and his disciples.
I think it's almost certain that Jesus had brothers and sisters, and by that I mean full brothers and sisters.
The high death rate encouraged parents to have lots of children.
Roughly 40% of peasant children died by the age of 5. So there would be powerful motivation to have large families.
Life was precarious in rural Galilee. Everyone had to work just to produce the basics for survival. This remnant of a grain mill in Yodafat shows how villagers made bread from scratch. This is what's left of a 1st century olive press. Olive paste and oil were both basic foods. This was the daily rhythm of Nazareth. Jesus would have been working with Joseph from a young age just to keep the family fed. Most people think that Joseph was a carpenter, but biblical forensics shows that might be wrong. we have to look at the original Greek words of the Gospels to see why. The Greek word tekton is translated in most Bibles as carpenter.
Is not this the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary?
But Joseph's true trade may have been very different.
It's important to understand that the Greek word that's used for it is tekton, which is simply somebody that works with their hands. He may have been simply somebody that works odd jobs fixing tools for peasants.
Joseph and young Jesus may sometimes have worked with wood, but more likely they shaped stone, repaired houses, and even worked in fields. We cannot be sure. But we can be sure that a tekton would not have owned any land. And that means Jesus and his family were very low on the social scale.
The fact that he was a tekton, a hand worker, means that he and his family had fallen out of the mainstream of that agrarian imperial life. They had lost their lands. And that puts Jesus a step below the normal peasant.
This is the picture of Jesus' childhood as best as archaeology can paint it. We know he was raised on a diet dominated by bread and olives, that he did not grow up around a carpenter's workshop, and that he was almost certainly not an only child. Archaeology can even reveal the simple toys he may have played with. But one day, this peasant boy grew up and became a man called Jesus. Here begins an even bigger puzzle. What did that man do for more than a decade before he arrived at the banks of the Jordan, a time when the Bible is completely silent? We're about to break that silence. There is almost no written evidence of Jesus' life before he turns 30. We can't be sure what he did for a living, whether he was married or had children. We don't even know what he looked like. Some of the oldest known images of Jesus are hidden here under the streets of Rome. Early Christians painted them on the walls of these catacombs in the 3rd century. The artists could have had no idea what Jesus really looked like.
What the artists seem to have done is simply taken templates that they would have worked with for their frescoes and for their mosaics.
They often used the template for the god Dionysus. That Jesus has feminine flowing hair and no beard. When Christianity spread north into Europe, the image of Jesus morphed into the faces of Europeans. For almost 2,000 years, believers have painted Jesus